Good morning. Good morning. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I want to thank Senator Dick Durbin for shining a spotlight on the need for swift action from FDA to address the ongoing shortage of cancer drugs that are vital for the lives of patients across the country. Cancer is already difficult to live with, but not having access to the proper medication to help you combat such a deadly disease is beyond the pale. In Cook County, nearly 9,000 people died from cancer in 2020, 9,000 people. This occurred with access to life-saving cancer drugs that were available. Now imagine what those numbers will look like in 2023 when cancer patients can't receive these drugs due to a nationwide shortage. Let's not forget this shortage will significantly impact under-resourced communities that already struggle to receive the care and treatment they need for their cancer diagnosis. Black men have the highest rate of prostate cancer, more than twice as high as the rates for all other groups. Hispanic men and women are almost twice as likely to have and die from liver cancer than non-Hispanic whites. Hispanic women are 40% more likely to be diagnosed with cervical cancer and 30% more likely to die from cervical cancer as compared to non-Hispanic white women. These communities already suffer from not having access to medical care early enough, lacking access to medication, or being unable to secure advanced therapies and surgical interventions to save lives. This ongoing shortage of drugs to help those living with cancer will only exacerbate this problem. Our longstanding mission at Cook County Health is to serve all in need and those most vulnerable in our communities. We remain dedicated to assisting our communities to have positive health and providing equitable access to the services, support, and treatment they need across the county. We stand with Senator Durbin, and we want to thank you, Senator, for your leadership in our request that we have immediate access to the life-saving drugs that make treatment possible. I want to thank not just Senator Durbin, but CEO Rocha and Dr. Patel for joining us today. I also want to apologize. Senator Durbin was gracious enough to make himself available today. I, however, have a commitment. I'm supposed to be speaking, actually, in 15 minutes someplace else. So I thank everybody for joining us today, particularly our healthcare professionals. I want to acknowledge Alma, who is here. Alva, who is here. Melva, one more time. Melva, who is here representing Commissioner Deere, who is, as many of you know, recovering, and we're grateful for her presence. Thank you, Melva. All right, Senator Durbin, thank you so much.
Thank you, President Preckwinkle. It's an honor to be here at Cook County Health. Let me read you a letter that I received from one of my constituents recently. She wrote, "My mother-in-law has stage 4 cancer. She is in desperate need of a chemo drug, carboplatin, in order to stay alive. She's tried a number of other drugs, and although they work for short periods of time, her oncologist has moved her to this drug, which is the one thing that has the potential to save her life at this point. The drug, however, is in short supply. Her doctor can't get it. She's in a holding pattern. We're not ready to lose her." Think of that stark situation. Bad news, you have cancer. Good news, there's a drug that can cure your cancer, at least give you quality of life. Bad news, we can't get our hands on that drug. That is the reality in the United States of America today, in Chicago, in Illinois, and across the nation. This heartbreaking note is one example of the desperation of patients, family members, and healthcare providers that they are experiencing because of this shortage. Today, nearly 300 drugs are in shortage in the United States, from antibiotics to cardiac medicine to chemotherapy, representing a 30% increase in the number of drug shortages over a 1-year period of time. If you watch television for 5 minutes, you're going to see an ad for a drug. And you may even reach the point where you can spell Xarelto and say the word properly. But the reality is there is not an abundance of drugs that are needed in many critical areas. Just the opposite is true. Drug shortages occur for a variety of reasons, fragile supply chain, manufacturing problems, limited market competition, over-reliance on materials from other countries, and a faltering genetic drug industry. The current shortage of cisplatin and carboplatin occurred because of manufacturing problems in one plant in India. This shortage is particularly problematic for people facing cancer diagnosis, given that in most cases there's no alternative treatment. These are frontline medications that successfully treat hundreds of thousands of U.S. cancer patients each year. But because of limited supplies, providers are having to ration care only for the sickest of patients. Sadly, we know the reality. Every month delayed in cancer treatment can raise the risk of death by approximately 10%. Another side effect of a drug shortage is a chilling toll it takes on medical research and ongoing clinical trials. Last month, researchers across town at Northwestern achieved a major breakthrough that will allow doctors to more effectively deliver chemotherapy to brain tumors. This holds great promise for the treatment of glioblastoma and other neurological diseases. However, one of the drugs used in this research, carboplatin, is now nearly impossible to obtain. Had researchers not been able to access this drug during the course of their work, the breakthrough that was announced a few weeks ago may have been delayed for weeks, months, or never achieved at all. After learning of these shortages, I sent a letter to the Food and Drug Administration in Washington, urging that agency to take immediate action to address this shortage of critical cancer drugs. I asked the FDA to allow for safe importation of drugs from other countries, to work with manufacturers to see if expiration dates could safely be extended, to provide clear and timely updates to providers on expected new shipments of the medications, and to expedite inspections and reviews. Shortly after sending this letter, the FDA announced that they would allow for the importation of China's injectable version of cisplatin. I'm pleased that the FDA has taken this step. I hope it brings some relief, but we have to do more. We have a strategic petroleum reserve, and that is obviously needed in some emergency situations for energy needs in America. I think, as Dr. Kasuri of the University of Chicago has proposed, that we ought to be thinking about a strategic essential medicines reserve as well, so that the United States is prepared for these shortages and people don't literally die waiting for bureaucrats in Washington or even members of Congress to do the right thing. I've worked with my colleagues since the beginning of COVID to pass provisions that strengthen our federal drug stockpile, enhance FDA's visibility into pharmaceutical chains, and enhance our domestic manufacturing capability. That's just a start. There's more to do. Receiving a cancer diagnosis is distressing enough, but receiving a cancer diagnosis and being told there is a drug that can save you, but they can't get their hands on it because of shortage, is simply unacceptable in America. We must do better. I want to make sure that I call these folks up in the order that was originally given, and that order was on a piece of paper, which the President took with her. Here we are. Israel Rocha is the Chief Executive Officer of Cook County Health.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Durbin, and thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Really want to start by thanking the Senator for raising the alarm on this important topic. I also want to thank President Preckwinkle, our commissioners, and our board of directors of the health system for their continued support in building a health system that is responsive to the needs of Cook County, and especially in the areas of advancing cancer care for our community. June is National Cancer Survivors Month. According to the National Cancer Institute, an individual is considered a cancer survivor from the time of diagnosis through the balance of their life. Each day, Cook County Health cares for dozens of cancer survivors, supporting them through their diagnosis, their treatment, and their aftercare. I am exceptionally proud of the work that we do here, ensuring that patients, regardless of their ability to pay or where they come from, can access and receive the type of care that they need, especially when it comes to cancer care. Ensuring equal access to cancer care is incredibly important in reducing disparities in cancer rates and cancer mortalities, especially in people of color or disadvantaged populations. Cook County Health has established a center of excellence in the field of cancer with a goal of reducing barriers, improving patient outcomes, and making sure that patients have access to wraparound services so that they can live their healthiest life. The work that Dr. Patel and many clinicians do here at Cook County in the field of cancer is critically important and life-changing, but it cannot be done without having access to the necessary treatments and drugs that help to be able to abate cancer and to resolve the condition. Receiving treatments of cancer can be stressful enough without additional barriers in the time of need. When it comes to cancer, there's one simple thing to know: time is critical to healing. I am grateful for Senator Durbin's leadership and for the FDA, which has taken the important step of alleviating the shortage in the interim by importing chemotherapy from regions like China. I urge our leaders to come up with long-term solutions to ensure that patients can receive the care they need in the time they need it. Many lives are depending on it. Now I would like to say a few words in Spanish. Estoy orgulloso del trabajo que hacemos asegurando los pacientes independientemente de su capacidad de pago o donde vengan para poder recibir el tipo de cuidado contra el cáncer que necesitan. Cook County Health ha establecido un centro de excelencia en el campo de cáncer. El trabajo que han sido Dr. Patel y los médicos en su equipo en el condado de Cook es importante para poder ayudar a nuestros pacientes de cáncer. Pero no se puede ser una manera efectiva si no tenemos los tratamientos necesarios. Le pido a nuestros líderes que encuentren soluciones para garantizar que nuestros pacientes pueden recibir el cuidado que necesitan y las drogas que necesitan en el tiempo que necesitan. Hay muchas vidas que están dependiendo en nuestras soluciones. So, in final conclusion, just want to thank everyone for joining us and to please raise this important issue. Without drugs, it doesn't matter what we can do. It is essential that we have the treatments necessary so that our physicians can be able to heal our patients and the systems of care into the time they need it. Thank you very much for your leadership, Senator Durbin. There you go.
Thank you. Dr. Patel is the chairman of the Division of Otolaryngology. I'll let you pronounce that, Doctor. He's chairman of the Cook County Health Care Cancer Committee and interim medical director of the Cook County Health Center Cancer Center. Dr. Patel.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm incredibly grateful to be here, standing alongside Senator Durbin, Mr. Rocha, and President Preckwinkle to raise awareness of the dire circumstance that we're currently encountering. I'm Dr. Urjit Patel. I'm a head and neck surgeon specializing in cancer care here at Cook County Health for the last 20 years. I also serve as interim medical director of the Cancer Center, as well as chairman of the Cancer Committee. I've worked here for over 2 decades, and this is the first time I've encountered the type of drug shortages that we're encountering today. Over the past 8 weeks, we, as well as the rest of the nation, have encountered a severe shortage of a critical drug named cisplatin, as Senator Durbin has already mentioned. We're now seeing a cascade of shortages in other drugs that are often second and third line therapy after cisplatin. Chemotherapy drugs like these are critical tools in combating common cancers like head and neck, lung, bladder, and gynecologic cancers. Due to critical shortages, we have to alter treatment regimens accordingly. We estimate we are altering regimens in as much as 30% of our patients. Sometimes that's a small change, and we might say that's not a major issue. In roughly half of those patients, though, there may be a substantive change, and we have to go with either less established or possibly inferior choices, compromising care. We're now starting to run thin on second-line therapies like carboplatin, Taxotere, and a list of roughly 10 other drugs that are also running short. Again, we're not alone. The whole country is facing this shortage, but we at Cook County Health are finding we do not have access to the critical drugs we need to take care of our patients. Proper treatment, as you might expect, allows our patients to not only survive, but also to thrive after a cancer diagnosis. With these different regimens, we are concerned this will be compromised. It's too soon to know what the full ramifications of this will be, but if the shortages continue, we expect to see worse outcomes, longer durations of treatment, worse side effects, likely increased risk of cancer recurrence, and even death. As a doctor, I'm incredibly frustrated. These drugs have been developed, they are generally available, they are effective, we know they make a real difference in patients' lives, and we just can't get them right now. As leaders here at Cook County Health, we're committed to President Biden's Moonshot Initiative. We're taking cancer care to the next level, And yet, at times like this, we find we can't even get access to the basics. I'm hopeful the FDA's recent decision to import cisplatin from China will help alleviate our immediate needs, but I'm thankful for Senator Durbin's leadership on this issue and creating long-term solutions. We cannot allow drug shortages like this to continue to impact quality of care that we provide. I'm here standing today with Senator Durbin and our local leaders to call on federal authorities to take meaningful action to address these shortages for both the immediate and the long term. The longer we wait, the more lives will be compromised. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm sure you're here some to ask other questions on other topics, but I'm going to confine the first round of questions to the topic at hand here. But I want to reflect on this for a moment and just say that we are in a situation in America where we give a patent to the drug companies. The original drug usually was based on research paid for by taxpayers at the National Institutes of Health, but the pharmaceutical companies develop products and then receive patent protection for a period of time. There's a battle as to how long a period of time that will be, and they have to surrender their patent rights, and there's a generic drug that can compete with them. But the fact is, at some point in time, our belief was the patent rights run out, and the consumers ought to have the benefit of the drug at a lower cost than the original charge. Well, now we're finding that many of these generic drugs that succeeded these brand name drugs are becoming unavailable because they're not as profitable. We have got to step into this market situation for the good of the people, not only of this country, but around the world. There has to be a much more rational approach to this in terms of the affordability of life-saving drugs. God forbid you and others have someone in your family facing a cancer diagnosis. Virtually all of us have at some point in our life. And to be told there's a drug that can cure this cancer or at least give you a longer life, but we can't find it anywhere in Chicago, Illinois, or across the United States is just unacceptable. I think this strategic essential medicine reserve may be an approach that is worth pursuing, and I'll plan on doing that in Washington. Answer any questions. There are 300 of them, 300 of them from basic antibiotics. I'm sure the doctor can spell these out. 300, that's a 30% increase over the number last year. It was around 200 last year. So more and more drugs are becoming hard to get. Doctor, would you like to comment on that?
I think we've both alluded to it already, but it's a combination of multiple factors: supply chain, perhaps less interest on certain manufacturing companies in creating drugs or manufacturing them due to profit issues, and it is quite widespread. We've seen it in the past for common things like vaccine for kids, which has been well established and yet may not be available because it's not in a manufacturer's interest. If we look specifically at chemotherapy, though, there's a list of at least 10 or 14 drugs that are in current significant short supply.
Thanks.
So, Senator, do we do too good a job here? Are these drugs so inexpensive that it's not worth it for the manufacturers to get involved and make them again?
I don't know the answer to that. Of course, these are for-profit companies, and they need to make a profit to continue. Obviously, the blockbuster drugs make a lot of money for these companies, and as long as they have patent protection, they're going to continue to reap those profits. We hope it's on a reasonable basis. That's another issue. But in the meantime, it used to be the generic industry would step in when the patent rights ran out and could find profitability. Now that's less and less the case, and more of the producers are overseas. So I think we need to take a look at the industry. We are top-heavy with the most expensive drugs, and we have serious emergency shortages at the lower end of the spectrum. So I think it's time for us to step into this situation. Remember, the initial research on 90% plus of these drugs was at taxpayers' expense. It's the taxpayers who put the money up for the drugs to be developed in the first place. At the end of the day, the generic drugs should be not only affordable but available.
Should we do more to encourage domestic production?
Yes, definitely so. I think we've learned that the hard way. We learned it with the COVID vaccines and many of the PPE products that we were dealing with. We cannot take this for granted. I've had 2 or 3 studies done at the federal level that really just verify the obvious. When we are dependent on foreign sources, interruptions in the supply chain, or the decision overseas in India to close down a facility that is not currently meeting our standards of production, can have a devastating impact on American medicine. Yes.
Sure. There are a number of ways that is impacting our ability to care for patients. If we have a patient who walks in today, Mr. Smith comes in for his infusion, we're choosing a different drug as opposed to one we would have chosen because of the shortage. Sometimes that drug is expected to give us a similar outcome, and we'd say as the clinicians, okay, we're okay with that. Other times we have no choice but to choose a drug that previous study have shown maybe is not well established for this disease or may even expect a slightly worse outcome. It may take years for that to manifest. So we might see that in terms of reduced cure rates 5 years from now. We might see it if we take the patient that Senator Durbin was alluding to earlier, patient who's on, say, maintenance chemotherapy. When that drug runs short and tomorrow we cannot give it, that effect might be felt 3 months from now. So it's being felt in multiple ways over a different time course. And I worry, though, that we won't know the full impact of this, but we will see it over the next several years.
Kind of sounds like a perfect storm with manufacturing issues, supply chain issues, but is there anything the government could have done a few years ago to prevent this from happening?
We thought we had the market properly calibrated to say that if you take this government research and turn it into a valuable drug, you're going to have exclusive profits because you exclusively can offer this drug approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And then we thought at that point the generic industry could step in and produce the same drug and make a profit as well. It seemed like a pretty obvious conclusion, and it worked for the longest period of time, but not so much anymore. And there are a variety of reasons that's the case. Some of them may be selfish. There may be profit-taking at the highest levels that is so grand that people in the generic industry see greener fields, some other place to go. Or maybe they're selective in the drugs that they choose. Some of the drugs, like antibiotics, are almost routine drugs, but if we don't have them as an option for many patients, it really can have a negative impact on their care.